First, I'd like to welcome everyone to the webinar, What Every Executive Career Toolbox Should Contain to Stay Competitive. 3- and 4-page resume replete with duties and responsibilities have been replaced with a 2-page impact resume. The Internet and smartphones drive today's succinct messaging, and the old paper corporate buyers of the C-suite have gone the way of the dinosaur. What tools do you need to be competitive today? Renowned career management expert Cindy Kraft will enlighten us in that regards today. Our main objectives for the webinar today are to offer you actionable advice in how to pad your career toolbox with Web 2.0 tools, transforming your old tired resume, and effectively employing the smartphone principle. A quick note on today's agenda: we will first be hearing from renowned career expert Cindy Kraft, and then we'll move into the Q&A session where we will spend the remainder of our hour. We would like this to be an interactive experience for you, so if you have any questions at any time, please go to the questions area in your GoToWebinar control panel and send us your questions. We can't promise to get all of them in, but we will do our best, and we'll follow up afterwards on any questions we did not get to. The presentation of today, the slides from the presentation today are already posted on the Proformative site where they will be freely available, and we will send you a link to the slides as well. Another logistical note, we're offering CPE credits for the CPAs in today's audience. For those of you who didn't click the box to collect CPE credits on the way in, you will see on the final slide of the presentation the email address of the individual that administers our CPE certification program. Before we get started, a quick word about Proformative. Proformative is the largest and fastest growing online resource for senior level corporate finance, treasury, and accounting professionals. Proformative offers a uniquely noise-free and valuable peer online network, direct subject matter expert advice, and features resources developed in direct collaboration with our constituency. Okay, let's get started by introducing today's first speaker. Cindy Kraft, CFO Coach, Executive Essentials. Cindy is America's leading career and personal brand strategist for chief financial officers and corporate finance executives with 16 years of experiences. Cindy partners with clients to help them understand their marketability, clearly articulate their value, and position themselves as the clear and compelling choice. Her clients are among the top echelon of financial gurus who understand that unique status requires unique packaging. A typical senior level executive spends so many hours working this job, by necessity, has shelved managing his career. Her client list includes CFOs of private and public corporations, private equity firms, and non-for-profits, as well as other visionary and accomplished senior-level finance executives seeking to position themselves for these $300,000 plus coveted leadership position. With that, it's my distinct pleasure to turn it over to Cindy Kraft. Cindy, take it away.
Thanks, Ernie. Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining the webinar. Today we're talking about toolboxes, career toolboxes, and more specifically, what every executive career toolbox should contain to stay competitive. Every executive career toolbox should contain the tangibles. Tangibles are those end products that you can actually touch and feel. And they include things like your resume, cover letters, your LinkedIn profile, a leadership initiative addendum, and even your reference sheet. And we will talk more about those. But more importantly, and perhaps even most importantly, are the intangibles. Conversely, intangibles are, in this case, the things you must have in place in order to be able to craft compelling, tangible documents. Just as leadership is an asset to a company, even though it isn't something that you can physically touch, so are the intangibles behind the marketing documents. In my opinion, the intangible is the most valuable part of the career toolbox. And those intangibles, they include your brand, your marketable value proposition, and I'll sometimes refer to that as an MVP, marketable value proposition. Your compelling message, the right targeted audience, your network, and last but not least, good career management habits. And we're going to start with the intangibles because without those, creating your marketing documents is really a wasted effort. So we're going to start with your brand. You can determine your marketable value proposition without a brand. You can even create value messaging without being branded. Identifying a target market and growing your network, they're both quite doable without a brand. But brand is differentiation. Being branded is strong and solid positioning. Branding speaks to how you have achieved success. A strong brand speaks directly to fit for culture. Fit for culture dramatically increases the chances of you landing in the right position, in the right company, within an environment that is just made for you to be successful. But it's more than that. What happens when, unfortunately, you lose your job? How are you known? What goes on your business cards? How do you introduce yourself at networking events? Rather than a CFO, maybe you've built a reputation of navigating corporate landmines or moving vision into results. Your brand transcends job title. In fact, your brand statement and brand tagline are the essence of who you are and what you do, rather than a former or, well, up until last week, or I was, or in my most recent. You are known for something, irrespective of your job title or lack of job title, and it is captured within your authentic brand. You know what a value proposition is, right? According to Investopedia, it is a business or marketing statement that summarizes why a consumer should buy a product or use a service. This statement should convince a potential consumer that one particular product or service will add more value or better solve a problem than other similar offerings. I want to repeat that. One particular product or service, in this case would be candidate, will add more value or better solve a problem than other similar offerings. You are probably most familiar with this term, sometimes called a unique selling proposition, if you're buying a car or you recently bought a car. Think Volvo versus a sweet sports coupe. Or a technology gadget. Think iPhone versus a Droid. Or a washer and dryer, stackable or top of the line, environmentally friendly. Often what you buy is determined by what you need. If you're a family man and looking for wheels to transport your family, even though you might want that sweet sports coupe, the reputation of something like a Volvo for safety and dependability, not to mention the need for room to carry your growing family, would win out. If you're into gadgets, an iPhone and an iPad might win the day because they are what you want. But if what you really need is a great interface with Windows programs, you might end up with something from the Windows phone line. And if you're living in a cramped apartment in downtown Manhattan, environmentalist or not, the old-time stackable washer and dryer just might be the only option because it is designed for small spaces and it meets your need. In the same way, the uniqueness of a product's deliverable plays into purchasing decisions. So a company hires candidates who can offer up a proven record of delivering solutions to the kinds of problems it is experiencing. The company has a need, and it needs someone who can fill that need. The company might want to hire the board chair's good buddy and fun guy Frank as CFO, but sans a record of being able to solve its current problems, undoubtedly need will trump want. Duties and responsibilities do not set you apart. If anything, They make you look more like your competition rather than the purple cow normally associated with a marketable value proposition. Your greatest value is rooted in an ability to take away pain. When you can offer up that positioning as a problem solver, you found your MVP. If your message is that you have held these responsibilities or those duties, you really don't have a message, and it certainly is not compelling. Only when you've figured out your MVP can you craft your communication message and execute a plan that will culminate in a sale and purchase. In this transaction, you, the candidate, are the seller, and the company where you want to work is the buyer. And I truly think the where you want to work is a critically important piece of the equation. We'll talk about that next when we discuss target audience. But without an MVP, you're really just one of many CFOs or finance executives or finance chiefs, or you fill in the blank. And when you're just one who looks like everyone else, your message is reduced to commodity, generic, without value, and if purchased, bought at the lowest possible price. Value conversations boost confidence and help to ensure you get paid what you're worth. One of my clients was recently selected for a CFO role. He had been a senior finance executive about 7 to 10 years ago, and then due to several different unforeseen circumstances and situations, he veered off that course. When he found his CFO opportunity, he was in a role that was paying $50,000 a year. Now, that's not the real amount, but the numbers will show the impact of this job transition. The CFO role he wanted paid $175,000. He fretted and worried about whether or not this deal was going to blow up in his face because the recruiter asked for his salary information, of course. However, she asked for that salary information after the interview, at which interview my client asked the CEO what the position paid. So my client knows what the company has budgeted, and he knows that the recruiter knows both salaries, and is convinced there was not going to be a good ending to the story. And it was a dream job for him, which only ramped up his angst. But you know what he did have? Value. And his value was something the CEO wanted, and wanted enough to bridge the gap between the $50,000 my client was currently making and the $175,000 his company was willing to pay. And my client is one happy camper today. I think the easiest way to get at the heart of your value in creating your messaging is through CAR plus SI. Challenge, action, result, plus longer-term strategic importance. What were the challenges, problems, issues, or the situation that you stepped into? That's the pain point. What kind of actions did you take? What was the measurable result to the bottom line? And how did it better position the organization for the future? In other words, how did you take away the stumbling block or blocks that were getting in the organization's way? It is important for you to be clear about how you've added value so the reader is crystal clear, because in an initial review of your resume or a conversation with a recruiter or a networking exchange, the other person is not going to figure it out for you. Once you've got your MVP and have honed your message, then it is important to identify who needs to hear it. And not everybody does need to hear it. Let's think about this in terms of TV shows. There are, of course, no shortage of 24-hour cable news stations, sci-fi, romance, throwback to the 50s and 60s shows, reality TV of every kind, movies, and sitcoms. Do you watch all of them? Do all of those genres appeal to you? My guess is no, nor should they. You are wired uniquely with passions and interests that are uniquely yours. Neither should you try to be all things to all people or appeal to every company. That is often what happens, though, when a candidate chooses to play the posted position game. Rather than understanding his marketable value and being strategic about his messaging to the right audience, he constantly bobs and weaves, tweaks and rewrites his marketing documents to appeal to every job posting he reads. He may or may not even know who the company is, but it doesn't matter. He wants to be the candidate, so does his best to strip out what doesn't seem to fit and plug in what does. The result is more often than not that the chameleon strategy means you have no idea what's working and what isn't. Even worse, you have no idea who you are and what your real value is to a prospective company. And somebody who's reading your resume also knows that. Understanding who, which companies, need your particular skill sets and experience, and which of those companies you consider worthy of having you, means you can spend your energy and effort in a focused and productive way. Think about the power of niching. Those who do it successfully don't have a message that appeals to everyone. Rather, their message is targeted and focused on a particular audience. Does it mean that they only get purchasers from their target audience? Probably not. But it does mean that their marketing dollars and their time is spent efficiently and effectively to produce the greatest return on investment. While it may seem counterintuitive to have a focus campaign, it really is much more effective. And finally, it is incumbent upon every executive today to have a network. That is not people you know. It is people who know about you. And because you are actively and consistently and constantly in their space, you are constantly and consistently top of mind. I love this quote from the book, 33 Million People in the Room, and it's called Reed's Law and the Universe. The effectiveness of large networks, and social networks in particular, can scale exponentially with the size and social importance of the network. In other words, Reed suggests that every new person in a network doubles its value. According to Reed, if you have 25 people in your network, the amount of possible connections and subgroups within your group of 25 people is 33 million. If you add just 5 more people to your network, the amount of possible connections shoots all the way up to 1 billion. That's great, right? Well, only if they know about you. Remember, networking is a verb, and networking has been redefined as who knows about you. You can know a lot of people, and how you define know can vary, but if they don't know about you, does it matter? Networking isn't always a strong suit for finance folks, so along with 33 million people in the room, I also highly recommend Harvey Mackay's Dig Your Well Before You're Thirsty and Keith Ferrazzi's Never Eat Alone as great reads on how to cultivate and nurture a vibrant network. Harvey Mackay's Dig Your Well Before You're Thirsty is an old book, but it is timeless, and what I really love about his book is the chapters are short, sometimes only 3 to 5 pages. So you can carry it with you, and when you have a few minutes, you can pick it up and read a chapter and walk away with a tidbit that can forever change the way you view networking. So These are some books that I recommend if you want to improve your knowledge base on how to network. To actually improve your networking, you actually have to network. Now that we know the intangibles, let's move into the tangibles that should be in your career toolbox. Oops, wait, back up here. I didn't talk about career management habits. Let's back up and stay with career management habits. Good career management habits. I heard someone say you should start networking for your next position as soon as you land. Yes, you should always be networking. But there are also some other good habits to embrace as part of an overall, longer-term career management strategy. Those include making sure your brand visibility is consistent and constant. Keeping your online visibility up to date. Staying on the radar screen of your target audience. Creating strong passive candidate positioning through the perception of a subject matter expert. I was listening to Dr. Charles Lowry in a series on being a person of influence, and his comment about habits really resonated with me. At first, you control your habits, and then your habits control you. We start out with the best of intentions, creating, hopefully, good habits, but very quickly those habits can turn bad and begin controlling us. For example, you might want to make networking a top priority and a good career management habit, but once you land, you get really busy with your new job. And you really don't need to network right at that moment. Does that sound familiar? And so the networking habit is suddenly overtaken by the habit or habits that are now dictated by the job. Or if you're unemployed, you may have started your job search with gusto, but once you tapped out your network, you now find yourself sitting in front of a computer searching for posted positions. You're stuck in a bad, controlling habit. It's not always easy to do the right things you know that you need to do, particularly if they're the hard things to do, like networking. For many finance executives, they would rather have their arm chopped off. And sometimes self-discipline seems non-existent when you either have no life because you're working 60 to 80 hours a week, or you've been unemployed for a long stretch and nothing seems to be working. A long-term career management strategy is just a necessity today. Those who are unemployed, particularly who were blindsided by the loss, are crawling through this process way behind the 8 ball. Some are simply shell-shocked, others discouraged, frustrated, anxious, and confused. Job search today is a new game with new rules. And if you don't know the game or the rules, the process is not only more challenging, but you'll find yourself back in that same pit over and over and over as you ride the get a job, work a job, lose a job, hunt for a job, get a job carousel. You wouldn't run your company without a business plan, right? This is your business plan for your career, and it needs to be worked and worked habitually to keep you in the driver's seat of your career. Now, let's move to the tangibles. And let's start the conversation on resumes by incorporating the importance of a target audience. I recently read an article by one of my colleagues that said this: customizing your job search for each position you apply to can be critical in today's job search. If you're playing the posted position game, she's right. But this strategy will still be an exercise in frustration because it is so ineffective. You will spend a lot of time, effort, and energy trying to be all things to all people for very little reward. And the one thing it often leads to is a position that isn't a truly good fit for you in a company with a culture that isn't necessarily a good fit either. If you have a clear and compelling branded marketable value proposition and a well-defined target audience, your resume should not have to be tweaked, modified, changed, or rewritten. You know your strengths, your passions, your skills, where you've had success, what you would like to be doing more of, and who needs what you bring to the table. Those things don't change. Neither does your solid positioning as a subject matter expert within a well-defined space. According to a very recent ladder study, your resume gets a 6-second initial fit, no fit review. Whether you agree or disagree with that time frame, remember, we are now in the age of the internet and smartphones, and whatever that initial review time frame is, it is short. In advertising, a 30-second commercial on TV is a 3-second spot on the web. And now, what used to be a 12 to 15-second initial review of your resume has undoubtedly grown shorter. This is a critically important point. With the advent of the internet, smartphones, and Twitter driving how we communicate, short and compelling has become even more important in our give it to me fast, make me care world. The most high-value piece of real estate on your resume is the top half of the first page. If you haven't sold a reader to take some action within that time frame, it could be a lost opportunity. If you fold your resume in half and what you see is a paragraph of vague generalities, usually under the guise of a summary or a profile, followed by a list of keywords, your resume is probably missing the value mark and your MVP questionable. At the senior level, the tendency is to do a pure reverse chronology resume. That just isn't always the best strategy. Neither is selecting a format you like and using format to drive strategy. Your strategy should always drive formatting, beginning with front-loading value in the top half of the first page of the resume based on your marketable value proposition and your goal. Remember, there is no promise of value in duties or responsibilities. In fact, at the senior level, with a typical career path, it is assumed that you have acquired specific experience in the areas of duties and responsibilities. Provide just enough of your scope of responsibility to facilitate a reader's apples-to-apples comparison, and then move on to the real meat of the resume, your value to a prospective company as a problem solver. And don't forget, white space is key. In a 6-second review, very small font with no white space will simply be tossed. Less is more, particularly if it is rooted in value. I see so many resumes with ½ an inch all-around margins, 8-point font, and long, long lists of bullets of duties and responsibilities mixed with a few measurable impacts and absolutely no white space. With such density, nothing stands out, and such a resume is definitely not smartphone nor 6-second review friendly. Yes, 2 pages is enough, even if you have 25 to 30 years of experience. This is an example of the top half of the first page of a resume I did for one of my CEO clients. Obviously, this client's name and contact information would have appeared at the top, but if you folded this page in half, you would see the value that is packed into that section. The bullets support the general statements made in the short opening paragraph. The columns on the right side provide critically important to this client information at a glance. In this case, he has worked for a very high-profile company that's immediately clear in the top half of the first page, even though they may not appear in the experience section until the second page. He has been quoted numerous times, which means he's a subject matter expert with strong, positive visibility among credible sources who can attest to his successes. It is only then that we move into his professional experience section. Remember, a resume is a marketing document designed to get you an interview for the kinds of positions you want to be doing. It is not, and was never intended to be, a data dump for everything you've ever done or every duty and responsibility you held over a 15 to 25-year career. Your intrigue is not as someone who can be all things to all people, but as a subject matter expert who has a narrow appeal to a specific audience and is using 2 pages to highlight problem-solving value that begs some kind of follow-up action. So what might you do with all those great contributions that wouldn't fit onto your 2-page resume? Well, my suggestion is an addendum that highlights leadership initiatives. And this is one initiative that I wrote for the same CEO whose resume you just saw. If you were to compare the resume I just showed you to this addendum, you would see how the 3 lines in the 3rd bullet in the top half of the resume has translated to an initiative cited in the leadership addendum. This was one of many initiatives that we delineated, and this particular one was scaled down to accommodate the PowerPoint screen, but it gives you a good idea of how valuable this document can be in showing thought leadership. Used in conjunction with a resume after talking with a recruiter where you know specifics about an open position, or as part of a leave behind after the interview, it is a powerful and tangible reminder of how you have solved the kinds of problems a particular company is having. You probably want at least 2, maybe 3 letters of introduction. As a cover for your resume, it makes sense to have one that targets a company directly and one that targets recruiters. Different audiences, a little bit different messaging. If you are using your network strategically, a letter that serves as a request for your contact to do something is also an option. That said, I think there are much better ways to network for opportunities than to simply use the "can you help me get a job" letter approach. Cover letters are not merely repeating the information that is contained in your resume. Otherwise, what would be the point of including a resume? Rather, your letter should be a powerful, value-oriented, standalone document. And while cover letters are your personal marketing documents, beginning every sentence with I was, I did, I have, I am, I would, can give the perception of shameless self-promotion. Remember, it's not about you. It's about the value that you can deliver to a company, which makes it all about the company. As the minimum of a digital footprint, your completed LinkedIn profile is a necessity, and it must be complete to compete. The things I believe are important to having a completed profile include your headline. This is not your job title. It's 100 characters to focus on brand, differentiation, and industry space. Use it wisely and completely. Your summary. Remember the old corporate bios companies had? Someone would call up and ask for information on the company and its executive team, and a package containing a corporate bio and individual bios for each officer would be printed and mailed. The summary is the Web 2.0 version of that old corporate speak bio, and you get 2,000 characters to write your compelling value narrative in the first person. Your experience is not a cut and paste of your resume. Otherwise, there really is no need for a recruiter to request your resume. But it should follow the format of your resume, meaning a brief apples-to-apples comparison plus a bullet that illustrates a measurable impact. Make sure that your education section is complete. Uncompleted sends myriad red flags, and honesty is the best policy. I'm sure you've seen some of the headlines about people inventing their education and degrees. Dave Edmondson, the CEO of Radio Shack, claimed to hold degrees in psychology and theology from Pacific Coast Baptist College, except he never graduated. Uh-oh. And he was fired once the media broke the story. Or Ronald Zarella, the CEO of Bausch & Lomb, who said he had an MBA from New York University, except he never graduated. And a trail of product recalls and product liability lawsuits have followed him out the door. Just don't do it. Don't even embellish a tad. It's just too easy today to uncover the truth, and trust me, the truth will eventually be uncovered, and Google will have a field day with it. You need recommendations. Often they can be a first screen to a recruiter. Rather than lots of vague, general attaboy recommendations, focus on a handful of quality, meaty recommendations that speak directly to your marketable value proposition, thereby adding credibility to and verifying the perceived value you bring. You can join up to 50 groups, and I recommend joining 50, but only be active in 2 to 3 that allow you to showcase your subject matter expertise. If you do any public speaking or webinars that include PowerPoint presentations, you can upload them to Google Presentation and/or SlideShare. If you read interesting things that are a part of your authentic brand, you might want to think about using the Amazon reading list. These other apps can further your brand, raise your visibility, and differentiate you from the competition. You know, all of those critically important intangible things. Lest you think I exaggerate about the importance of a LinkedIn profile, listen to one marketing and brand strategist who blogged about the parallels between a job search and a permanent political campaign. He says, one firm I consulted with almost didn't hire a qualified senior executive because, lacking almost any online presence, they strongly suspected he had fabricated his background. Wow. He hadn't, but the elaborate process of verifying his story nearly cost him the job. And finally, your reference sheet. I recommend 5 people who know you in a variety of ways. Those to whom you report, board members, investors, shareholders, and they can be past or present. Folks with whom you are peers, those who do or have reported to you, and any third parties with whom you've interacted, bankers, lawyers, accountants, even customers. You want their name, title, company name, phone, email, and their relationship to you. And one other thing about references. They have no place being discussed or provided unless and until you have a job offer. So, in summary, these are the tools I believe every executive needs in his career toolbox. The intangibles upon which your marketing documents are built, and the actual tangible result of knowing that intangible. And with that, Ernie, let's do a couple of poll questions.
Thank you very much, Cindy, for that great content, as always. Before we transition into the Q&A portion of the webinar, as Cindy mentioned, we're going to launch a few polling questions. We would appreciate everyone's consideration in answering the polling question. For those of you in the audience who are after CPE credit today, you'll need to answer both of the polling questions. And as a reminder for the Q&A, if you have a question you'd like us to have answered by Cindy, please ask it via the questions area in your GoToWebinar control panel. What I'll do is I'll go ahead and launch the polling questions, but as the polling questions are up, I will go ahead and start the Q&A with Cindy so we can make the most of our time with Cindy. So, Cindy, first question would be, why do recruiters ask for salary information, and do I need to give it to them?
Well, let's answer the second part of that question first. Yes, you do need to provide it. What's important to remember is that recruiters are different than companies. A company doesn't really deserve to have that information because they know what they have budgeted. A recruiter, as the agent or adversary, not adversary, agent is the best word, of their client, means that that information helps them to determine whether or not you are a viable candidate for their client. And that's really important because, you know, they don't want to place the wrong client and lose a relationship. They want to place the right client. And so if you are, just like in the story that I told, if you are a viable client who brings value to the table, trust me, it is in his or her best interest to figure out how to position you with the hiring decision maker so that you can get a job for the most money and she or he can get the highest possible commission off of that salary. So yes and yes.
Okay, great. Thanks, Cindy. Another question is going in regards to targeting your company. So the question is, what if companies where I'm going to work aren't hiring my position? How do I make some inroads into those companies when they are doing so?
Well, you know, my philosophy is it doesn't really matter whether or not a company is hiring, or at least whether or not you know that they're hiring. I think that's a better way to say it. 80+% of the job market isn't advertised. It's probably even higher at the executive level. So moving forward on the premise that you bring something valuable to the table that they need, and they need it bad enough to want to buy it, and that they will pay well to get it, is, I think, a great mindset to bring into this career game. And so making inroads is typically, you know, using your LinkedIn profile to reach out to people and tapping into your contacts in your network. Your network truly is very important. And you know, contrary to what finance executives think, probably network all day, every day. And you don't perceive it as networking because you're not actually looking for a job. You're not actually looking for anything, which is when networking is the easiest. But using your contacts to make those inroads to companies so that you can find those unadvertised, a lot of times it's referred to as the hidden job market, is really the best way. So you have proactive and you have passive. Proactive, you're tapping into your network and people on LinkedIn, which if you're doing it that way, it is networking, it is proactive. But then passively, you have a complete and compelling LinkedIn profile that attracts recruiters to you, attracts internal internal recruiters from the kinds of companies that you want to be working at. It attracts them to your profile. And it is always amazing to me how many of my clients' good leads come through their LinkedIn profile. So those are the two ways: networking proactively, a good digital footprint passively.
Okay, great. Someone's asking if you would please repeat the rule set regarding providing references and when they should be provided.
Sure. With references, I think you want about 5, and you want a good combination of how people know you. So a mixture of people to whom you report. If you work with a board, board members are great. If there are shareholders or investors in your current company or previous companies, they're great. Folks with whom you are peers. So those can be people that you work with, people who report to you, and then any third parties, bankers, lawyers, accountants, CPAs, and customers are great. You know, what's important to remember about references is you're not going to give a bad reference. You're going to give a good reference. So what is really important to the person that's getting it is that you give them access to people who know you in a variety of different ways so that they can all speak well of you in those variety of different ways. And you do not give your references out until you have been offered a job. You might be surprised to know how many recruiters will ask for references at the front end, and then they will actually recruit your references for the positions that they have. That's what they're looking for. They're not looking to check you out. They're looking to check out the people that you use as references because they're undoubtedly, because many people do that, they're higher level candidates. So references shouldn't even be in the equation until a job has been on the table, a job offer is put on the table.
Great. We have a lot of great questions. This one I find particularly compelling. How do you move the company to understand your value if they're not really sure what they needed in the position?
Boy, those things that are outside of your control, right? I assume that the question means that a candidate believes he would be a good fit for the company, but the company doesn't see it. If that's not the correct basis of the question, please feel free to interrupt or follow up Ernie or whoever asked that question. But, you know, there are some things that you have control over and some things that you don't. And the answer to this question is, if a company doesn't know that it needs you, do you really want to be working at that company? My guess is that if they don't really know they need you, they're going to undervalue you, and you're going to be pretty unhappy in a relatively short period of time. It's interesting that it really is the basis for them of being able to recruit the right people into their culture. I think sometimes the disconnect of knowing what a company needs is when you're dealing with HR. And that is a big black hole, in my opinion. That could be a whole nother webinar. But if you're actually talking to the decision maker and the decision maker doesn't know what he needs, I don't know that I don't know that there's any way you can convince him of what he does need. You don't know the company, you don't work there, you don't really know their needs, you're making an assumption. But if he doesn't know, it sounds to me like it's a pretty disorganized organization, different than if it's HR, who the middleman doesn't always know what the left and the right hand are saying.
Okay, great. We have a question around how to best present an education and work experience if it's focused kind of international experience when they're really targeting domestic U.S. businesses.
So it's an international candidate who wants to work at American companies either here or abroad?
Yes.
Okay. So everything that I said about resumes is true. There's a big difference between European resumes, Asian resumes. What is accepted in other companies is very different than what is accepted in American companies. So if you're an international candidate who is applying for a job with an American company, everything that I said about resumes is true. Your education is not nearly as important as your impacts to an organization. Your experience in terms of duties and responsibilities doesn't matter as much as your value, how you have made a company's pain go away. So American company, same strategy. If you're targeting international companies, non-American, I can't speak to that because I only deal nationally. Because it's so vastly different, that's why I don't do it.
Okay, great. Someone has a question around how do you, regarding the leadership addendum document. Do you send that with your resume, or how do you use that document and present that?
That is a great question. And, you know, if you are, let's break it into a series of different scenarios. So if you find a posted position that you're firing your resume off to, and just even saying those words is like fingernails on a blackboard to me, but the answer in that situation would be absolutely, positively, no, not ever. If the scenario is something like you've been contacted either through a networking contact or a recruiter found you on LinkedIn, and you have actually had a phone conversation with that person about what the needs of the company are, what the kinds of problems are, and it's been determined that you are a viable candidate, then that is a good time, and you've been asked for your resume, then that is a really good time to include at least pieces of the addendum. So the leadership addendum that you saw was one of maybe 15 to 20. You know, he's a very high-profile CEO, so he is a long career. His leadership initiatives are endless. So he would not send a 30-page document off to a recruiter, but what he would do is look through his vast number of leadership initiatives and say, you know, after that conversation, these couple or this one or this three, you know, they really speak to the kinds of problems that a company is having. And so having already held a conversation with a recruiter who is now interested in you as a possible fit, at that point we've moved beyond the smartphone philosophy and into the recruiter wants to know how you think. He wants to know about your leadership. He wants to know about your ability to vision and execute. And so at that point, attaching your some of the initiatives to your resume would be absolutely acceptable and appropriate and probably very helpful to you and very differentiating.
Okay, great. Someone kind of has a follow-up question, you know, around sharing your salary information with those recruiters. So say for the sake of argument that you've been out of work a while and you recently took a step back in salary, and they're asking to share your most recent salary. How would you position that to a recruiter, or how do you, is it succinct, or how do you message that to the recruiter?
You know, that's a situation for the client that I told you about. I was not making the difference up in those numbers. Those were not the actual numbers, but I was not exaggerating about the difference between what he was paid and what he got in the new role. You can't hide it. You can't alter it. You can't argue it. My philosophy is that if it is a will mitigate a big salary difference. If you don't have value, it really doesn't really matter much about the money. But if you have some issues, again, it's in the best interest of the recruiter to get you the most money because it puts the most money in his or her pocket. But they can only do that if they understand what it is they're up against. So what often would happen, and this will really trip you up, is if you going back to honesty being the best policy, if you aren't honest with the recruiter and you get offered a job, at one point your salary is going to be disclosed. And it will be found out. So dealing with recruiters honestly, the numbers are the numbers are the numbers, and you can't alter them. They are what they are. You have to come from a position of value, and value mitigates a lot of evils. Salary is one of those evils.
Okay, great. And we have time for a few more questions. One of them comes around, in all of the vast experience you have in resumes, what are and I know you've said this again, but I think this will drive it home, the 3 biggest mistakes that people make, and also on the other side of that, what are the 3 kind of best things that you've ever seen on resumes that you've seen from people?
Oh, my. Well, let's see. The 3 biggest mistakes, I think a lot of them kind of run into one another, but definitely one is the duties and responsibilities thing. And you would just be amazed how many resumes I see that are that. So duties and responsibilities. Choosing to use a pure reverse chronology format, or conversely, because you're trying to hide something, going with the gosh, I can't even remember how it's used because the name of it, because I never use it. But it's the resume format that hides. You don't use dates on the job, and you don't necessarily put the jobs even until the very end. They're kind of an after point, and your job titles. And the reason that you do that is you're trying to hide that. That always fails. Not for senior executives, not having a complete history. Now, again, I am of the 2-page resume perspective, but when a recruiter looks at your resume, they want to understand when you graduated. Put a date. I know it might be dating you, but value trumps age. Value, value, value. If you take nothing away from this conversation, value trumps everything. If you don't know what your value is, you can't really move forward well with anything else. So graduation date, experience, and just a summary of what your titles were so a recruiter can see progression. And then over about the last 10 to 12 years are where you want to be highlighting your impacts. And so a lot of times that is very missing from the resumes that I see that are written by a person himself. The best things that I've seen, branded resumes, they really sell well to culture fit. One of my clients who really was well branded and niched, he got noticed on LinkedIn within a day of posting his information. Another really good thing is the format that I used on the resume that I showed you, where you have that table, so that you can really, if you think about the latter 6-second view of the fit, no fit, makes it very easy for a recruiter to look at it in the right context rather than a resume that has a paragraph of vague generalities and then this long list of keywords. So if you did the fold test, there's nothing of value standing. So that kind of a format makes it very easy in a glance to really pull out value. Use lots of white space, bolding, to make things really stand off the page and draw the eye down. That's really the best kind of resume formatting.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Cindy. With that, in the sake of our time here, we're going to go ahead and close the Q&A sessions. Just a comment, we have an interesting debate that Cindy's involved in. We didn't get to ask her a question about it. She's probably wanted to talk about this, but we'll continue that conversation on Proformative about whether or not finance executives need a resume. So I invite you to explore that on Proformative and also all of Cindy's great blogs and other webinars that we've got posted on Proformative. I'd like to thank Cindy Kraft for her time and insight. For those of you in the audience today, if you'd like us to connect you with Cindy, please indicate that on the survey that we will invite you to take, which will pop up as soon as the webinar is over. Cindy is a renowned leader in this field and an excellent source of information on today's topics. As I mentioned previously, the webinar is available for CPE credit. If you didn't check the box on the way in, please send an email to donmoore@performative.com. Again, we appreciate your feedback on the survey, which will show up as soon as the webinar is over. Finally, I would like to thank the audience for your valuable time. We hope to see you on performative.com and at future events. Make it a great day, everyone, and have a great weekend.